I was supposed to be flying to Dallas, heading down to my cousin's lake house for the holidays. My suitcase was already checked in, boarding pass printed, everything ready. But just as I stepped into the long-term parking lot at the airport, I froze. I had forgotten something. Not something small. I had forgotten the real will, Franklin's will, not the copy I kept in the top drawer of the writing desk, the original. I turned the car around. I told myself I'd be in and out in 5 minutes. I had no idea what I was about to walk into, something no mother should ever have to hear, especially not in her own home, and especially not from her only son. The front door creaked softly when I pushed it open. I didn't call out. The air inside felt strangely still, too still. My keys were in my hand, but I didn't drop them in the ceramic bowl like I usually do. Something in my chest just paused. I walked quietly down the hallway, the floor cool under my shoes. That's when I heard the voices coming from the study. Low, quiet, deliberate. I froze behind the arched doorway, back against the wall, barely breathing. "If she's showing signs, we can file," one voice said. It was a voice I knew too well. Wyatt, my son. "Maureen, she's 75, another voice replied. "With the right documents, anyone can make a case for diminished capacity." Maureen, his wife. The woman who had slithered into our lives with gift baskets and polite disrespect. My heart pounded, not fast, but heavy. I couldn't see them, but I could feel every intention in their words. They were talking about guardianship, about me. Wyatt went on. "I've already started the process. Misplaced mail, forgotten appointments. She didn't file taxes last year. It's enough to get the conversation started." I nearly called out his name, shouted, but something in me said, "Not yet." I backed away slowly, careful not to let the floor creak beneath me. Outside, the afternoon light was golden, but I felt frozen. My hands trembled as I opened the car door. I sat there, inside the silence, gripping the steering wheel. The same hands that once held his scraped-up little fingers, the same ones that worked 2 jobs so he could graduate without loans, the woman who skipped meals so he could have extra. Now I was research, evidence, to be filed and used against me. My lips didn't tremble out of anger, at least not yet. They trembled out of the realization that somewhere along the line, I had let this person grow away from me. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not shattered, not fully, but the center of me, whatever warmth had been there, began to cool. And you know the saddest part? It wasn't the words I heard, it was realizing I already knew. Deep down, I had known for a while. If you've ever stood in your own hallway and felt like an outsider in your own home, you know exactly what I mean. That day, I stopped being someone's mother first and started becoming something else entirely. I didn't go back to the airport. I didn't call my cousin. I just started driving. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was floating somewhere else, years ago, decades even. I passed the ramp to the freeway and let instinct guide me. I found myself drifting down side streets I hadn't seen since I was newly married. When I stopped the car, I was parked in front of an old bakery squeezed between a hardware store and a worn-out beauty salon. The awning had changed, but that scent, almonds, cinnamon, sugar, still filled the air, just like it used to. Franklin used to bring me here every Sunday morning before church when we still lived in a tiny duplex on Lark Lanes, back when Wyatt was just a wide-eyed little boy who loved building towers out of jam packets. I walked in. The counter was shiny now, modern, marble, clean. But the tables were still mismatched. Old wood, uneven legs, each one holding a tiny glass jar with silk flowers. I sat by the window and ordered coffee. My fingers wrapped around the cup like it could hold me up. I looked out at the world. People rushing by in coats and boots, phones in hand, eyes down. I remembered Franklin reading the paper at this exact seat. And I remembered our son asking us about everything. Cars, elevators, bridges. He needed the how, not just the what, and we gave it to him. I brought home every book I could find, borrowed robotics kits before he even asked. He was curious, not entitled. Back then, at least. That boy I remembered? He feels so far away. The man I overheard this morning, I didn't know him. At some point, life had boiled over, slowly, like a pot nobody watches. You hear the bubbles, then the hiss, then realize the steam has filled the whole room. Memories get buried beneath the sound. Wyatt had taken control of Franklin's estate to ease my burden. He replaced our family accountant with some firm I'd never heard of. I let it slide. He set up recurring payments for property taxes. I told myself he was being helpful. Maybe I just didn't want to admit how far gone things had become. Tired mothers cling to hope. Widows cling to anything. Now the puzzle pieces I had ignored were flipping over one by one. And the full picture? It was starting to burn. I left half the coffee behind. It turned bitter on my tongue, not from taste, but from memory. The sun had dipped behind the clouds when I stepped outside. I zipped up my coat and just stood there, not afraid, not lost, just remembering learning how to stand on my own. And that quiet moment, it was the beginning. The parking lot behind the library was mostly empty when I pulled in. It was mid-afternoon and the dull gray winter sky cast long shadows across the pavement. That same familiar silence hung in the air, the kind that wraps around an old memory like a soft blanket. I didn't have a plan, I just ended up here. This was where I worked before Franklin passed, back when life still had structure and purpose wasn't something I had to search for. When I used to walk through these sliding doors and feel like I knew who I was. My tires crunched gently over gravel as I settled into the spot I always used to choose, far corner near the employee entrance. Funny how even after all these years, some habits never unstick from your bones. I sat for a moment, engine off, watching the branches of the big pecan tree sway lightly near the back fence. I used to eat my lunch there under that tree, reading staff memos while sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped thermos with a yellow daisy on it. I stepped out of the car slowly. Despite everything, the moment I stood facing that building, I felt something settle back into place. Familiar sidewalk cracks, the heavy glass door, the warmth of paper and wood and history inside. The scent of printed pages and aged bindings drifted out the second I stepped in. It hadn't changed. I walked past the new checkout kiosks and the remodeled workspace. They had definitely upgraded the place, but the heart of it still beat the same. I didn't stop at the front desk. I turned left, past biographies and travel books, straight back to the archives room. The door was halfway open, and the same soft buzz of overhead lights greeted me as if I had never left. The archives hadn't changed much. Same beige file cabinets, same flickering light in the back corner, still needing that one bulb replaced. At the desk sat a young woman, probably an intern, looking up from a laptop with patient eyes. I smiled softly and asked if I could view an old personal document I had once cataloged. "A family file," I said. "A copy of a legal document my husband made." She didn't ask any questions, just slid a simple clipboard and pointed me to the corner table. That room had seen more of me than almost any other place in town. It felt like mine in some forgotten way. My hands still knew exactly where to go. Middle drawer, second row from the right. Code RE, Franklin Whitaker. And there it was. The folder wasn't large because of the will itself. It was bulky because Franklin always included notes. Sticky tabs, margin comments, highlighted codes. Every page was marked with his short, clean handwriting, like breadcrumbs in a legal maze. I spread the pages out slowly across the table. The will was intact. Every clause was there, no changes, no edits. But what pulled my eyes in were the tiny sticky notes tucked throughout the folder. One of them had my name. "Dolores, if you ever feel unsure, look at the numbers. The truth is always there." At the bottom of the last page was a breakdown chart. Assets, properties, inheritances, even account permissions in case of emergency. Franklin had outlined everything in his clear, ordered way. But the most important line? D retains access. Grant holds only pending professional review. No executor rights without confirmable legal clearance. That was his handwriting, and that simple sentence lit something in me. Not rage, not panic. Recognition. Franklin had trusted me. Despite everything I had forgotten, or feared I was forgetting, he trusted me to protect myself. I felt heat rise in my chest. Not anger, strength. Not only had I not failed, I had proof that Grant had never been meant to have full control. Not then, not now. I pulled a notepad from my purse and started a checklist. My writing was slow, but my grip was steady. 1. Make verified copies. 2. Secure second legal counsel. 3. Audit recent financial activity. I underlined each with deliberate pressure. I wasn't lost anymore. I wasn't naive. And I certainly wasn't powerless. By the time I stepped outside, the trees were bending under a heavier wind, and the sky had shifted to navy. My hands were chilled, but my heart, solid. I walked to the car with a purpose. The difference was obvious. Even in the reflection from the mirror, I looked together. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't asking myself if I was slipping. I wasn't replaying Wyatt's whispered conversations in my mind, wondering what was real. I knew what was real, and I knew how to fight back. The next morning, I moved differently, not because my joints were stiff and not because I was pretending. I just needed the image of myself as vulnerable to be believable. I slipped the pocket recorder into the lining of my wool coat. It was thumb-sized with a red light that blinked once and disappeared. I used to wear it during interviews at the library and book reviews. That quiet little tool would become my shield. I left the door unlocked. I boiled some tea and forgot to clean the countertop. Let the kettle whistle once and then turned it off, leaving it just slightly open, a signal of absent-mindedness. By 10:15, Wyatt arrived. He didn't knock. He rarely did these days. It was quiet when the door opened. No knock, no text, just the soft creak of hinges like he owned the place. Wyatt walked in carrying a brown paper grocery bag, his shoes dragging just slightly on the floor, like he didn't want to be overheard, the same way kids move when they're sneaking snacks. He looked at me sitting at the kitchen table and gave me that almost smile he used when he wanted something. I was still in my robe, a crossword puzzle half filled in front of me, pen without a cap resting nearby. I looked up slowly, like maybe I hadn't realized someone had come in. He bent down and kissed my forehead. "Hey, Mom," he said. "It's a little chilly in here, huh?" I nodded like it was news to me. Yeah, I must have forgotten to turn the heat on again. He set the bag down on the counter, loud on purpose. I heard him pull out a canister of soup, a crusty loaf of bread, and an old tin of crackers that had probably sat near the register too long. He asked how I'd been sleeping, stirring his voice with just enough fake concern to make it sound sweet. I blinked slowly, then answered his question with another question before switching topics halfway through the sentence. Something about peanut butter. Anything to make me sound a little scattered. He offered to warm up the soup. I smiled at him gently, like he was doing me a favor, like I really needed it. He moved around the kitchen like someone inspecting a place, not visiting it. His eyes landed on everything. The calendar, the dishes in the sink, mail piled neatly on the counter. "Did you open this yet?" he asked, gesturing toward a letter from the insurance company. I shook my head. No, I was going to, but I must have set it aside. He nodded slowly, no judgment in his face, but something calculative behind his smile. "I can help you go through this stuff if you want," he said. I said nothing, just stirred my tea like I didn't hear him at all. Over lunch, the conversation drifted. He talked about the news, then about how work had been. But after the soup bowls were cleared and his hands had wiped down the counter, he leaned against the doorframe and watched me for a long second, like he was confirming his own suspicions. Then he cleared his throat. "So, I've been looking into some assisted living options. Nothing drastic. Just safe places, good reviews, gardens, wellness programs, friendly staff, people trained to help with memory care and early cognitive needs. He said it like he was saying something gentle, like it was thoughtful, like it didn't cut me in half. I paused, blinked, then smiled faintly. I guess it could be nice to have someone else doing the cooking, I murmured. Then I leaned in like I was squinting and asked him what day it was. His reaction was quiet but satisfied, exactly what he wanted to hear. "Thursday," he said kindly. "Oh," I said softly. "Of course." I sipped my tea. He stayed a little longer, moving slowly through the hallway, checking on things without saying so. He mentioned the light flickering in the laundry room, pointed out the draft near the back door, asked if I needed him to help sort the medicine cabinet again. Everything was catalogued, everything was noted, by him and by me. But he had no idea I'd been recording him this whole time. That tiny recorder in the lining of my wool peacoat, still sitting on a hook by the kitchen door, running from the moment he walked in. After he left, I sat down on the edge of the bed with the coat in my lap. I unzipped the inside and pulled out the recorder. My fingers didn't shake. I clicked stop, then labeled the file in my notebook. Visit 1, Wyatt, care home suggestion. Later that afternoon, I transferred the audio to my laptop. I didn't play it back. I remembered every word, every pause. The performance had been clean, no missteps, no interruptions. Wyatt was careful, but so was I. The next day, I pulled an old number from the back of my recipe book, tucked away in a plastic sleeve. It belonged to Marilyn Calloway, a woman I hadn't spoken to in years. We had worked together for over 15 years at the university. She was sharp as a whip and didn't miss a thing. I called, and my voice was calm. "Marilyn, I need a legal mind, not just any lawyer. One I can trust, one that doesn't ask stupid questions. And it's personal." She didn't hesitate. By 4 p.m. that same day, she was at my kitchen table with her laptop open and hair pulled back in a tight bun, like she always used to wear on filing days. She listened to the recording every second. Her face didn't twitch, didn't react. But those eyes? Sharp as glass. When it ended, she spoke 3 words in the most resolute voice I'd heard since Franklin passed. "We're handling this." She got to work. Right there at the table. She asked about power of attorney, if I had updated it since Franklin's passing. "No," I said. She nodded. "Step 1 then, revoke Wyatt's access. Step 2, we draft a new POA, a new will, complete with independent witnessing. Step 3, submit a notice to the state of change, all time-stamped, all recorded." She wasn't surprised. That was the unsettling part, like she'd seen this play out before, just with different names and different false smiles. We moved to the den. She reviewed Franklin's annotated will, the real one, not the copy Wyatt had probably seen, the one with Franklin's handwriting in the margins. She helped me set up encrypted cloud backup, explained how to lock files with 2 passwords, one only I would know. By the time she left, she had placed a formal revocation of power of attorney in front of me. I signed. She slid the form into her briefcase without drama and looked me clean in the eye before walking out the door. "This is just the first step." When the door closed, I stood by the window, watching the trees flick in the wind. I didn't feel old. I didn't feel like a woman caught in a trap. I felt like a woman building a case. And this wasn't a game. This was chess. The following morning, I moved more slowly than usual, not because I needed to, but because slowness left a trail. I left the refrigerator door open just a crack. I accidentally placed the measuring cup in the sink instead of the drawer. Then I tousled my hair just enough to look like I hadn't noticed myself in the mirror all morning. Small things, the kind of things someone like Wyatt would notice. At 10:40 sharp, his car pulled into the driveway across the cracked pavement. I recognized the way he parked, tidy, careful, aligned perfectly with the path like he practiced. He came up the porch steps humming a little tune like everything was normal. I pulled my cardigan tighter and stepped out onto the porch. "Wyatt," I said with fake surprise, being careful not to sound too sharp. "Didn't expect you today." "Just in the neighborhood," he said, holding a yellow folder in one hand and a paper cup of coffee in the other. He handed me the folder without sitting down. It was from the same care center he had mentioned during his last visit. I accepted it, pretending to struggle gripping the edges. Let my fingers shake just slightly as I settled into the porch swing and placed it gently on my lap. "I grabbed another brochure for you," he said kindly. "This one talks about the music room. They have a garden club, too." I nodded, but didn't open it. "Looks nice," I whispered. His eyes sparkling a little, not from pride, but from satisfaction. I knew that shine. It was the same look from when he built sand forts on the beach as a boy and waited for someone to say, "Look at what you did." Then he leaned in a little. "I spoke to someone," he said softly. "A legal guy, friend of Ashby's. He handles the paperwork, just basic stuff. He can help us with your documents." There it was, Ashby again. The same quiet snake who showed up after Franklin passed, pretending to help. Maybe it was friendship. More likely, it was a smooth pitch served in a sympathetic tone. "I just want to make sure things move smoothly if something were to happen," Wyatt added, pretending the words were hard for him to say. I didn't interrupt. I just stared out toward the yard, squinting as if the sun was too bright. "I'm close to getting everything in order," he said. "Just a few legal steps left." He stepped back to take a phone call. Through the window, I watched him pace. His voice was low, but he was too comfortable. He had no idea the porch microphone was on. I caught every word. Phrases like expedited application, documented forgetfulness, mental decline file, and finally, she'll be ready soon. Ready for what? That question stayed cold in my gut. When he came back, he carried a fresh cup of tea in a bright yellow mug I didn't recognize. "Here you go, Mama," he said gently. I took it, careful to keep my fingers loose around the ceramic. He watched closely, too closely. "Did we talk about this center before?" I asked. He beamed softly. "Yeah, you remembered," he said proudly. I nodded. Maybe I did. When he asked if I wanted to visit the care facility on Thursday, I didn't answer immediately, just took another sip and said, "The lemon in this tea tastes like something Franklin used to make." He nodded, not realizing that he'd just handed me the string that tied his entire plan together. That brochure he brought, I'd recognized Marilyn's handwriting in the margins. She'd circled a section. Transfer of medical proxy contingent on observed cognitive decline. Wyatt wasn't just planting doubt, he was cultivating a legal trail in real time. After he left, I went back inside and disconnected the porch mic. The recording was clean from start to finish. Tone, words, names, dates, everything logged, time-stamped, saved. That evening, Marilyn returned. She brought her tablet, 2 secure hard drives, and a document folder that made my kitchen table look like a courtroom exhibit. I handed her the yellow brochure and pointed at Wyatt's notes. She scanned it silently, then looked at me. I didn't need to explain. She understood. Then she reached into her coat and handed me something of her own, a sealed envelope with an affidavit, signed by Dr. Elkins, co-signed by 2 legal witnesses. It confirmed my clear mental and medical competence. Dated, certified, filed. The game had changed. Wyatt believed I was sliding, fading, but the truth? I was preparing, documenting, recording. 3 days later, Marilyn submitted the response packet to Ashby's office herself. She didn't mail it, she didn't email it, she walked it in. Inside were the affidavit, the updated power of attorney, the new will, formal revocation of Wyatt's authorization. All logged, signed, notarized. Neutral on the surface, but within its weight, a full legal defense. That same evening, Marilyn called me. Her voice was calm, measured as always, but I could tell something had shifted. "Ashby called me today," she said. I felt my grip tighten around the phone. He said he was withdrawing from the situation, said he reviewed everything and was stepping back due to personal ethics. That was unexpected. Then she said something else. He added that Franklin once did him a favor when no one else would, decades ago. Not exactly a confession, but it cracked something open in Wyatt's carefully built wall. That night, I pulled Franklin's old handwritten note from my desk drawer, the one with the faded pen and folded corners. It simply read, "If our son ever makes you doubt yourself, trust the facts. You've always seen more than you think." I slept better that night, not because it was over, but because I had his words in my hands and the evidence in my files. It was just before noon when I heard the soft crunch of gravel under tires. I hadn't gotten a call, no text, no "just stopping by." That alone told me one thing. Wyatt was feeling the walls close in. I stood completely still in the hallway, listening to the slow creak of the front gate. I didn't need to peek through the curtains. I knew that rhythm. His walk had always been confident, controlled, but that day it sounded different, measured, hesitant. He knocked. For the first time in months, he actually knocked. When I opened the door, he was standing there with a manila folder under one arm and a small bouquet of supermarket tulips in the other. The paper around the stems was crinkled, like he'd gripped it too tightly all the way over. "Hey, Ma," he said, trying to soften the ridge in his jaw. "Brought you these." "Yellow," I noted gently, taking the flowers. "Your father used to bring me yellow tulips, around spring." "I remember," he said. I stepped aside wordlessly and let him in. He followed me into the kitchen, eyes scanning, reading, trying to find a signal, a clue, something. The smell of cinnamon was thick in the house. I'd been warming cider on the stove since morning, just for the scent. Everything was clean, bright, calm. On the surface, harmless. But beneath it all, I was ready. He didn't sit down. Instead, he set the folder on the kitchen table and stood across from me. His body language was carefully collected, but the pacing of his breath gave him away. "Ashby stepped back," he said finally. "Didn't explain fully, just said there were complications." I replied, stirring the cider. Complications tend to come up when people see things clearly. He ignored that. I wasn't trying to do anything wrong, Ma. I was just trying to help you structure things better." I looked at him fully for the first time. He looked tired. Or maybe that's just what guilt looks like when it tries to dress up as concern. I reached into the drawer beside me and laid a folder on the table. Mine. Neatly stacked pages. Signed, notarized, thumbprinted. Marilyn had organized everything almost beautifully. I slid them toward him, one by one. The new legal power of attorney. Updated will and estate documents, signed and filed. Affidavit of cognitive capacity signed by Dr. Elkins and 2 witnesses. A declaration revoking any authority he had previously been granted. He didn't reach for them. He just looked at me. His brow twitched once. I said nothing. I just met his eyes. I didn't stutter. I didn't tremble. I just told the truth. "I've made my decisions, Wyatt. Fully aware, clear-minded, on record. You don't need authority over me, because I haven't lost myself. But it seems you have." His lips parted like he had a sentence prepared, but he didn't say it. Instead, his eyes glanced toward the hallway, like he was looking for someone else, hoping maybe Marilyn was hiding behind the door, or maybe that I wasn't alone in all this. Then I said it. Not all quiet equals confusion. Sometimes it's strength. He stood silent for a while. Then, without touching the documents, he turned and walked to the front door. He didn't slam it, didn't speak another word, just walked out. I waited until the sound of the engine faded into nothingness before I returned to the kitchen. Tucked behind the napkin holder was the recorder, still rolling from the moment he walked through the door. I stopped it, labeled it clearly in my notebook. Quiet confrontation, full clarity, Wyatt exit. That night, I didn't dream of Wyatt as a little boy. Didn't cry, didn't run through what I should have said. I dreamed of order, labels, files, clean shelves, clear air. I had reclaimed more than just my paperwork. I'd reclaimed my space, my say, my silence. The next morning came with light that didn't feel so heavy. It filtered through the blinds softer, kinder. And within that quiet, the house began to shift. Not with noise, with presence. At noon, the doorbell rang. This time it was someone else. Tessa, Marilyn's daughter, carrying a canvas duffel, a plaid laptop bag, and an energy that felt like she belonged here before she even stepped inside. "Hope you've still got that guest room open," she smiled. "Mom told me you could use a little extra support." Or company. I waved her in with a smile I didn't even realize I had left. Tessa moved through the house in a rhythm that didn't disturb anything. Her footsteps matched the floorboards. Her presence smoothed the creases left behind from Wyatt's tension. She was studying archivist sciences, same path I once walked. And just like that, life, without being invited, started to flow back in. Tessa moved through the house like she'd been here her whole life. She wasn't loud. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She just fit, like the spaces had been waiting for her. By her second day, she had a desk set up in the guest room, printer humming, labeled folders lined neatly on the windowsill. She even brought her own kettle and a bag of lemon verbena tea that filled the kitchen with a scent I hadn't smelled in years. That first night, I heard her typing from down the hall long after I went to bed. Not fast, not trying to finish something, just steady, like a rhythm, like a heartbeat. It reminded me of Franklin's old typewriter, the one that still lived in the basement, buried under boxes of old conference programs and vacuum-sealed sweaters. The sound of someone working toward something, one word at a time. By the third morning, she asked if she could help label boxes in the garage, not out of politeness, not in a rush to clean, like she actually wanted to. I said yes. It wasn't really about the boxes. It was about motion, about presence, about saying yes to life beyond documents and defense. That afternoon, she offered to digitize my old field research notes from my time at the university. "I know you kept your indexing style consistent," she said. "It'll make archiving easy." That was when I handed her the folder, the one with the new power of attorney, legal recordings, medical affidavits, my will, Franklin's letters, backup flash drive. Clean copies only, not the originals, but everything she needed to protect me if I ever couldn't do it myself. She treated the documents like rare manuscripts, laid them out gently, meticulously. She added cloud backups, gave everything encrypted labels, with extra security folders named in a system only the two of us understood. My past, my voice, my power. Digitized, protected, and preserved. That night, I wrote just one line in my journal. The house is no longer quiet, and neither am I. The morning air had changed. There was something honest in the way the wind moved through the trees that day. Confident, assured, like the season itself had come to terms with what it was leaving behind. I sat by the front window with a coffee mug resting between my palms, the same one Franklin used to sip from, world's favorite librarian, printed on the rim in peeling gold letters. I opened my journal, pages now thick with ink, post-its, clippings, quotes, proof of every step taken back toward myself. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote, "Healing isn't loud. It's consistent." Tessa left early for class that morning, but her shoes by the door, her tea mug beside the sink, her jacket on the banister. These little signs of life made the quiet feel different. Not hollow, just full of space. Space that I had cleared. I noticed that the photos I'd taken off the wall had already been put back. Same places, same frames, same memories. but now on my terms. Later that afternoon, I opened the nightstand drawer where I kept two very specific things. One, the letter from Ashby's office confirming his withdrawal and leaving a paper trail of Wyatt's manipulation. Two, the old note from Franklin, folded so many times now the edges had softened like linen. I placed them side by side, one old memory, one fresh correction, both proof that I had never truly been alone. The last visit came unannounced. Of course, Wyatt's car again. No flowers this time, no soup, no smile. Just him, standing on the porch with nothing in his hands. For the first time in this entire saga, he looked uncertain. I opened the door. "Just wanted to talk," he said. "We are," I replied calmly. He glanced around behind me. "Is someone else here?" I shook my head. "Nope." Then I added, "But I'm not by myself." He looked confused, maybe even unsettled. "I didn't mean for things to get so complicated," he said. "No," I responded. "You meant for them to look simple, so no one would notice what you were building." He exhaled. I didn't invite him in. We stood there just inside the doorway, face to face. Two people who used to be mother and son in the way that mattered. Now, just two grown adults staring at each other across a gap made wider by ambition and betrayal. I let the stillness stretch. I wanted him to hear it. The strength that didn't need shouting. "I read the files, Ma," he said. "The will, the affidavit." I nodded. "I wrote them." "I'm sorry," he said next. The words landed behind his teeth instead of from his chest. Then he turned to leave again. No hugs, no bargaining. Just a slow retreat down the steps of a house he once lived in, but no longer understood. After the engine drove off, I closed the door and walked to the study. Sat down in the chair where I used to review collections of rare documents, back when storage boxes and headsets were my weapons of importance. I checked my backup drive again. The folder was still there. Dolores_W_legal proof_final. Every visit saved, every case built. Not because I was afraid, but because I refused to be forgotten. That night, I lit a candle on the mantel, not for memory, but for celebration. Not loud, not dramatic, just light. A steady reminder that no one gets to decide your story for you. You do. The wind tapped gently against the windows as I wrote one final line in my journal. They thought I was slipping. I was saving receipts.